In this episode of Vietnam and I, we welcome a visionary entrepreneur and investor who bridges cultures and opportunities. Born in Germany to Vietnamese heritage, he now dedicates most of his time in Ho Chi Minh City. As the founder of a thriving global community for Vietnamese professionals, he is on a mission to help them expand their networks and elevate their careers. With a focus on supporting local founders and businesses, he is reshaping how overseas Vietnamese connect, collaborate, and contribute to Vietnam's growth. Stay tuned for his insight on networking, business, and an interesting life in Vietnam. Hello everyone, welcome to Vietnam and I, a program where we find out the stories that connects people to Vietnam wherever they are in the world. And today we are joined by an inspiring guest, Mr. Quang Do, a German Vietnamese entrepreneur and the founder of Overseas Vietnamese, a thriving global community of ambitious overseas Vietnamese professionals. And since its founding in 2019, OV has grown to nearly 35,000 members on LinkedIn, dedicated to empowering overseas Vietnamese worldwide to advance their career and personal growth. Now, thank you, Quang, very much for joining us here today. And how are you?
Jing, thank you for having me. I'm very well. I've just moved to Vietnam. Life is very exciting. I also just got married. And I just became my own boss, and so there's a lot of changes, but life moves fast and it moves in the right direction, I hope.
3 biggest goals in life
Yes.
you have achieved so far. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Way. And to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I know your slogan is you are German and Vietnam and everything in between. So can you just share with us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I think my story is really that of overseas Vietnamese, and there are so many stories out there, but my particular one is I'm the son of Vietnamese immigrants. They came to Czech Republic back then in the late 80s, and then immigrated over to Germany when Germany reunified. And then in 93, I was born in Germany. My parents never intended to return to Vietnam, and I grew up there. Had a wonderful childhood, very worry-free, and then in Germany it really depends as a Vietnamese on where you grow up. I grew up more in the south of Germany, what would mean that I wouldn't grow up with so many other Vietnamese.
Right.
And so my childhood was very much worry-free. I had a Vietnamese household. My parents raised me in a Vietnamese way, but whenever I would leave the house, I had a German school. This was my German environment, and then after school I would play with other German immigrants. In Germany you have a lot of East European immigrants like Turkish people, Russian people. So these would be the people that I grew up with. And so a very multicultural upbringing. Up until I was 18, I moved out of my house. This was close to Stuttgart, which is in southern Germany. And I moved to Munich to study. This is where I spent most of my 20s. Studied there, and then I spent a brief stint in Berlin before I then moved to Singapore 3 years ago. This is where I was based for the last 3 years. I planned it to be 1 or 2 years because I wanted to come to Vietnam, but it became Singapore first, and it took a bit longer there just because I really liked Singapore. But now I finally made the move, and now I'm here with you, so very excited.
Okay, but how was your Vietnamese heritage was carried along with you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because my parents came to Czech, to Prague, and to Germany when they were quite young. So they were brought up Vietnamese, but over time, of course, they were assimilated to the German culture. They were westernized over time, which means initially they raised me in a more Asian, in a more Vietnamese way. And
like speak Vietnamese at home.
Speak Vietnamese at home.
Eat Vietnamese food, something like that?
Vietnamese food. My mom always cooked Vietnamese food, but over time, the food perhaps got fusioned and mixed with German food increasingly, of course. My parents tried to raise me in a more strict way over time, but as I got into my teenage years, my friends had a bit of more relaxed parents, and then my parents became more relaxed as well. And this is what I meant by gradually my parents probably became a bit less Asian over time. Okay. They never intended to return to Vietnam, and so I spoke Vietnamese with them but I never learned reading and writing. This is something I'm learning at the moment. And so I sort of got slowly less connected to the Vietnamese roots that I have or my heritage, especially when I moved out and I had less exposure to my parents. But interestingly, as I went into my 20s, I rediscovered or self-discovered Vietnam on my own, and I started to embrace my Vietnamese roots more, which then led me to start the community overseas Vietnamese. I had more Vietnamese friends in Germany. And then I traveled to Vietnam more often on my own as well and with friends to really see it from a more explorer, from a more tourist perspective. Whereas in the past, when I visited Vietnam with my parents, it would be more from a view of visiting relatives, not being able to explore the country so much. And so this came quite late in my life, I would say mid-20s, where I started to just become more curious about Vietnam. And I think this is also because I just became more mature and more grown up to a point where I started this community, and we can talk about this in a bit. But then my commitment, my involvement became very big. My curiosity became deeper. And now I'm here in Vietnam and trying to go as deep as possible.
Sure. It's interesting, but I'm also curious about the first specific moments that has brought you to the idea of bringing, Vietnamese overseas professionals, connect them and build a network to have a community of everyone in one place.
I get this question a lot, and it's interesting to give an answer to that because there was no grand plan in the beginning. There was no 5-year big concept planning out on a whiteboard or something. It was very organic. And I think that might have helped to really grow this because it came from a very authentic need that I had. And the real story is I was in my mid-20s. I was trying to build a professional network for myself. I was using LinkedIn more. I was setting up my profile and everything. And my parents are basically working class. And so I don't have a network that is white collar, that is corporate, that is influential, and that could get me internships or jobs or, prestigious positions in companies that I would aim for. So my thinking was, who can I reach out to help me? Okay, I'm a Vietnamese. Perhaps there are Vietnamese.
Who lives in overseas?
Perhaps there are other overseas Vietnamese that are ahead of my journey. They are more successful, they're more accomplished. They perhaps would be willing to help me, but they don't find any way, or we don't have a way to connect, to find each other. And then I was just looking for an existing community because I thought this must exist, right?
Okay.
And I think
there was none?
There was none on LinkedIn at least, and I didn't look much beyond LinkedIn, and I just started that group on that very day on a very, non-intentional kind of thinking. Just created a group, very generic name, Overseas Vietnamese. I didn't think to later brand it as OV and make it cool as today. And from there, it just grew very organically. And so you see, it's one of those things that really grew from my own need and my own selfish drive almost, where over time I just realized this is something bigger than myself, and now it's even become my life purpose.
But of course, you got some help back then from overseas Vietnamese or from any professionals that you was looking at that time, so that got you an idea to, to expand the network, your own network. Just tell us about that. So
I had and I have help still until today all the time. The beauty of a community is that it's a group of people that are very helpful. And until today, it's very, very member driven. And in the beginning, I was, very inexperienced with community building. I really built things from the ground up, from, operating based on what I think would work. And I was very glad about any help that I get, right? And that sometimes led to a bit of, unstructuredness into who would help and who is a member and who is actually a team member. And so I had a lot of help here and there, where after some point I realized that it's best probably that you have one person with a very clear vision and one person that would drive the vision very clearly. And this is the model that I've been operating on right now. And so I get a lot of help. The members help themselves, the members connect by themselves, and I really try to build the infrastructure and the enabling vision and mission for us to be on the right direction. And that's the model until today.
Right. So you started OV in 2019.
Yes.
And it has rapidly growing up until today. 35,000 members on LinkedIn is a very big network. But of course, there was a lot of challenges, I guess.
Yes.
Starting out. Anything that you remember the most and you like to share?
Yeah, and we still today, I think, have a few challenges that are at the same time opportunities and at the same time challenges. OV has been built to be a global community from the ground up, and so if you build something global, naturally you have different cultures, you have different mindsets, you have different ways of doing things. One of which is tooling and tech. Which platform do you use? Which messaging do you use? The idea of bringing together people from the US, from Europe, from Australia into one place sounds easy, but everyone is using something else, right?
Yeah.
In Europe, we use WhatsApp. In US, they use iMessage. In Vietnam, we use Facebook and Messenger and Zalo. So how do you get this under one? This has always been a struggle, I think. And I would even argue 35,000 is not that big given the total size of video that we actually do have in Vietnamese abroad, right? But it's a very quality pool of people, and I'm very proud to say that we capture those people that we care about the most. I think we are lucky as well that LinkedIn was a platform that we use where most professionals, at least in the Western world, would use it, and now increasingly in Vietnam as well. We started right before or right at COVID. This was a time when everyone went online, everyone was wanting to connect. And we've built on top of that trend. I think over time, a lot of challenges emerge. Like I said, the differences in thinking, and Vietnam doesn't have the most easiest history in the world, right? So there are things that you would need to bring together, and OV was always very focused on being a very positive, being a very forward-looking, and being a very optimistic kind of community that is only focused on helping Vietnamese thrive in their careers and in their journeys, right? And this is until today the focus and the narrative that I tell people, that this is the very purpose. We are English-speaking young generation of overseas Vietnamese. Everyone tries to make it in their life, and OV is the space where we come together and support each other. That's it. And I think that very mission has resonated with a lot of people because we try to stay focused on that particular purpose. And we are in a very similar generation where I think career and work is one of the two top topics. The other one would be love and partner. And we are very focused on that career, and we have always built our mission on that. And that's why I think we were able to scale despite any challenges.
Okay, so now you have your own platform for your members besides LinkedIn?
Yes, so for context, we have two things right now. We started with the public open groups, which is a LinkedIn group, which is very big. We have a small Facebook group that is not really managed much. We have a lot of WhatsApp groups in many cities, and these are the local chapters, basically. Now, what is happening is, since I left Google, my previous job, and now doubled down on running OV, I've been launching a private membership community. And this private community, this sits on Slack. So Slack is this American tech platform where we host our community there. That's the private community. And this is basically invite only and application based. And so this is for paying members. This is for those members that want to have a more focused community experience. And we've been seeing this feedback and this demand from our members because it's sometimes a bit unclear in the open groups how to connect.
Okay, so you describe OV as a private network for ambitious Vietnamese professionals, entrepreneurs, and creators. And you just shared with us that you have built many platforms to bring people together. So is there any other kind of values, specific values that OV provide to its members?
Yes, so our full focus now is basically the private membership community, and the value there, or the reason for people to join is really twofold. One is they want to advance in their career. This is really a professional networking platform, and so what you can do is you will build connections with people across industries. We have a lot of people in tech, we have a lot of people in finance, and so whatever company you want to break into, whether that's Google, Meta, we have those people, and people that are perhaps more early or more mid-stage career, can join and build their network globally. It's a global focus. More than 80% of members are not in Vietnam, and we try to make it a very international network. So that's the first reason, and that's the more, I would say, public version of how we portray and position OV. But there's a very strong second motivator, which is that of heritage. And so I interview every candidate that wants to join, and a very strong motivator, a very strong drive for people to join is just to belong, because I think we have two big groups in the community. One is Việt like me, who grew up overseas, and as we get older, we start to embrace our
culture,
or Vietnamese side more, and just became more curious. And then we have the other who grew up in Vietnam, and then they went abroad, perhaps to study, perhaps to work, and they just miss Vietnam, or they want to stay connected. Maybe someday they want to return. And so those two groups come together in our community, and we don't really differentiate that. We want to have anyone who is out there trying to thrive in our community. But that second reason of trying to stay connected to the Vietnamese community, talking about things that are very specific to us as Vietnamese professionals, for example, returning to Vietnam. That's a very common topic that I speak with other Vietnamese privately about, and a lot of our members want to talk about this, and you can only talk about this with Vietnamese that are abroad, right? So that's a very big reason as well. And I think if you ask about value, the value of a network is always the people. So we do have a few things like regular events, meetups. We have a mentorship program that is launching soon. We have a member directory. We have a chat space, the Slack space that is on 24/7. But these I never take as the primary reason for members to join. The primary reason is the access to the people that you get. And that's always something that only community can give you, because all the other things you can get elsewhere. You can join master classes. You can go on YouTube and you can educate yourself. We're not an education, we're not a service company. What you get here is really that very specific group of people that are very talented, very accomplished, very helpful, and we all put them into this one space so that we can help each other. And that's, I think, very unique for this community.
Right. But I'm also curious about the of course, I understand about the contributions, the helps that your members provide, or helping each other. But has there been any like important achievements that you can flex about of OV? Of course, connections and good friendship is among very important values of us human. But I'd like to hear more about the achievements that you have so far with OV.
Yeah, anecdotally, I hear a lot of stories, and ultimately, community, what we measure ourselves on, what our core metric is quality connections. So that's really what I measure myself on. That's why when I say 35,000 members, I don't care too much. I care more about what kind of stories and achievements are being made based off those connections, right? And this is why we launched a private community, where I feel I don't want to put more members into a bigger room. The idea is to put the right people into smaller rooms so that they can connect. And that's the very idea how we actually make the community smaller, based more on depth and quality. And so the community launched in July. It's been only more than 3 months. We do see early signals of achievements and success stories. People are just connecting a lot, and people are giving each other job referrals. I always try to get people into Google by giving referrals. And a lot of our members host workshops on very tactical topics. And so we're going to launch a mentorship program soon. I hope there will be a lot of stories coming out of that. And anecdotally, I hear the impact that we are having through members that meet me after a very long time. And I hear things like, hey, I met my boyfriend through you, through OV, or I met my business partner through you. But these stories are very hidden to us sometimes, because we run such a big construct of very different platforms across the world, and people connect, and once they connect, they just stay connected, but it's very hidden to us sometimes. In the private community, we get more visibility into that, and we try to track those stories down, but I'm very sure there will be businesses being created. There's a lot of knowledge being exchanged that will lead eventually to impact for Vietnam and for people overseas. And we will find more formats and more ways to capture that impact and to really help people either move back to Vietnam or move overseas or get a job. And these are all features that can be integrated into the community over time. We are now very focused on the people part, like mentorships, peer mentorships, coaching, and over time we will extend it to more things.
Right. It's inspiring to know that OV has been a launch pad for many people, at least in networking and mentorship. But is there any difference in how Vietnamese overseas collaborate compared to other like pure Vietnamese or pure foreigners?
That's a good question. It's a loaded question as well. So how I would put it is,
because I imagine that you guys all Vietnamese.
Yep.
But then speak different languages.
Yes.
That is the first thing that's really different, right? But in in terms of mindsets and behavior and all, is there any difference?
Yes, there are big differences. I think in terms of upbringing and mindset. And I mentioned the two groups before. We have the Việt kiều that are fully overseas raised, and then we have those that are from home and then went overseas. And of course, those two groups are completely different. They are completely different in terms what kind of values they have, how they even behave, and what they think about life and broadly. And just sharing with you, I'm Việt kiều and my wife is fully Vietnamese, and I even see those kind of differences between us in the relationship as well, which is very interesting.
Right.
At the core, we have the Vietnamese roots, which are very strong, and there are a lot of commonalities there. But then the breadth of and variety of the kinds of Vietnamese that exist in the world is just mind-blowing. And this is something I think I have quite a unique insight into American Vietnamese, French Vietnamese, German Vietnamese, Australian Vietnamese. And everyone is very, very unique to the cultures they grew up in, which is a very interesting observation to see. So it's cross-cultural differences, but there's also generational differences. This is a very interesting aspect as well, where most of and when I say it's my parents' generation, are very alike, somewhat in terms of their thinking, quite Vietnamese, quite traditional, get a good job, make money early, marry early, and all of these things. Yes. Whereas our generation, the more younger English-speaking, overseas-born perhaps, are very modern. So I would say the gap between generations are very, very big, and this is something that is different to Western cultures, I feel. For example, in Germany, if you see a German dad and a German son, those two people sometimes could be friends. They're very alike. The difference in generation is not so big. But if you take a Vietnamese father and a Vietnamese son, in our generation, the two people are like two different species. Very different mindset, very different thinking. And one example that I can mention perhaps is the older generations might be coming from a different time, might be knowing Vietnam from a different time. And they're sometimes cautioning the younger generations about other people, about Vietnam. For example, when I come to Vietnam, people will always say, be careful, don't trust everyone. And it's until today, that's of course a mindset that is still carried on here. But what I would say is the more internationally exposed people, we have a higher sense of trust to the world and to each other. And I think that's also the environment we grew up in. Perhaps in Germany, I have a very strong trust in my fellow citizens. And this thinking I take into the community as well. And I try to reinforce that level of trust, that level of support with each other. And over time, I think we can, at least within the OV scope, build that culture and build that mindset. And I've seen that people are very selfless in how they want to help. They're very trusting to each other. And we try to be, with English as the binding language and being a more modern-minded, open-minded community, to be very trusting to each other and to have a very positive outlook both on Vietnam and the Vietnamese people everywhere. Yeah.
And I guess that is the core idea of OV as well, which is bridging people with different backgrounds and different mindsets. So now making OV as your full-time project, I believe that you're confident that your community will grow even bigger in the future. So do you have any plans? Because you shared about mentorship, coaching, and jobs referrals and all that. So, and then I also heard you said about relationship, about love. That is quite interesting. Is that in your plan for the future?
It's not on the roadmap specifically. I'm not sure if we want to go that direction.
Okay.
But what I can say is there's for sure a need. And what I do see, this is what I share with the show is, at many offline meetups, there will be single people looking for perhaps not just a business partner. So that is, I think, happening already, and we wouldn't prevent that from happening. I don't see that conflicts in any way with what we do, but I don't see the community or our setup to go in that direction as a specific service or as a specific positioning. So my point would be, we host professional networking events. We host those meetups, events, and summits. You can do you there, meet, interesting people, meet people, and whatever, relationship you drive from there, that's on you.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. But do you plan to expand your scope of membership? Or just within the community of overseas Vietnamese or Vietnamese who went overseas and study and work and wanted to return?
Yeah, and you asked before about the overall business scope, and I think one way to see this is in terms of the business. Membership will always be at the core. But we also will go B2B, which will be more on the job recruiting side. So we will help companies to hire from the OV pool. And then I want to open a physical space in Ho Chi Minh as well for people to come back. And this would be open, of course, to non-Vietnamese, to experts, to local Vietnamese as well. And so the membership in itself and the brand OV, this is focused on people that are more abroad, or returnees, or people that want to connect with people that are abroad. So this is Việt plus Vietnamese abroad. And if you ask within that membership scope, if we want to expand, currently the focus is a lot on tech and finance. People that are abroad, typically white-collar corporate people that are employed, a few entrepreneurs here and there, and then a few other industries. But because OV is very active and has been started on LinkedIn, naturally these would be the people that would join us, like people that are more in traditional industries, people that are more the traditional white-collar workers. What I would love to see over time is, of course, we expand the scope. But in terms of industries, I would love to have more creative people in there. I would love to have people in fashion industries, art industries. And the overall long-term vision with the membership, at least, is that OV can provide a custom value proposition and a custom community experience to any Vietnamese in the world. For example, if you are someone working in tech in San Francisco, if you are part of OV, you can connect with fellow San Francisco-based OVs. You can connect with other tech-based OVs, and you can even plug into the tech world in Saigon, say. And so I want the community to become bigger, but at the same time, for the individual member, it should feel more relevant and more customized. So that's the overall idea. And then the more people you have, the more you can customize the experience to the individual member, but that individual member can then also tap into the wider network. Say you need people in other industries, you need a lawyer, you need a banker.
Right.
You can then tap into the wider network, and you would find your Vietnamese lawyer, your Vietnamese banker. So that's the vision. Making the network bigger while it feels smaller and more relevant to the individual member. And then the scope is unlimited. It's really about getting as many good Vietnamese and thriving and successful Vietnamese into the network as possible, because then you get network effects, and then you can succeed together and really build out a network that is very, very strong due to its members.
Okay. It's very interesting looking back in the history, right? In our parents' generation, like 40 years ago, of course, right after the war, many people are looking out for going out there, going abroad, and witness the world out there. But now, 40 years later, many of our younger generations is now looking back to the country, to Vietnam, and wanted to return.
Yeah.
To you, how do you see Vietnam in the current context, and how do you believe that younger or many generations of overseas Vietnamese could make even greater impact for Vietnam?
Yeah, I love that question. Just because I'm, I think, the living example of now someone who moved back to Vietnam. Therefore, I'm naturally biased. I have a very strong conviction and belief in Vietnam. At the very least, I think it's a very good time now to live here. And from what I've seen, now not talking about career or economics, I think just purely quality of life, sense of freedom, sense of, self-fulfillment. Vietnam is one of a kind right now. And I'm speaking from a point of view of a Việt of course, and I see this becoming very mainstream in the community of people, at least spending 1 year, 2 years, and 2 years then become 5 years here. I think I'm even quite late to the party. I know a lot of people who've been here 5+ years already, and they've been making their way up and been succeeding.
It's never too late.
It's never too late, yeah. I think now it's actually especially a good time. It can be a bit late later on, but never too late, because I think Vietnam is on such a strong traction upwards, and it's such a fast-growing country, and it's a very unique window to be here to really see that rapid change that I don't think many other countries show in Southeast Asia. So if you're Vietnamese, it's a good consideration to come to Vietnam. And I always say, at OV we don't have the specific message for people to come. We are more neutral about that, and we say whatever your journey is and wherever you want to thrive, you just go, and we support you on your journey. But for the few that are perhaps open to come to Vietnam, and that are perhaps open to take a salary cut in exchange for the adventure, in exchange for the excitement, I think it's a very, very special time. And if you do so, the OV community is there. And it's a already very strong community of people that are on the ground, and that at least makes it very rewarding, very fun, and a very exciting journey. So that's how I see Vietnam. It's, I think, perhaps not for everyone. Vietnam is different than more developed countries. Vietnam is different in terms of how it's structured, how people operate, how things are working. And you will need to adapt, which means you will need to have an open mind. But for those that are adaptable, that have an open mind, that can think for themselves, and that are perhaps more entrepreneurial, a bit scrappy, and very proactive in designing and shaping your life, I would say this is one of the places in the world to be, and perhaps the place to be.
Great advice. Quang, thank you very much for joining in Vietnam and I today to share your journey and the story of overseas Vietnamese. It's incredible to hear about yourself and OV that is building a bridge for Vietnamese worldwide to connect, to grow, and to thrive. And to everyone watching, thank you for tuning in Vietnam and I. And if you are a Vietnamese professional who's looking for a supportive network, be sure to check out Overseas Vietnamese. And in the meantime, just keep exploring, connecting, and creating value wherever you are. And goodbye now, and see you next time.